But Naval Ravikant is an angel investor, and he was talking about how the difference between someone who is passionately engaged with their job and the person who is just putting in their hours, when you kind of extrapolate that over a career, that's the difference between like a senior analyst and maybe the CIO or the VP of analytics.
Hello everyone, Ken here, back with another exciting interview for you. Today I had the pleasure of speaking with John David. He's the founder of Silvertone Analytics, a consulting agency that helps organizations make the most of their data. He also sits on the advisory council for the business school at Greensboro College and teaches analytics classes at Greensboro and High Point University. He co-hosts the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast, and I've linked the podcast YouTube channel below and also to the episode that I did over there. So definitely check that out after you watch this interview. In this video, we focus on how to break into analytics, the difference between data science and data analytics, and how to demonstrate your worth in an interview. Now, on to our conversation. All right, so John David, thank you so much for coming in. I'm getting so many different requests about starting careers in data analytics as well as data science these days. And I thought, who better to bring in than you, the host of the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast. Thanks for making it in.
Oh, I appreciate you having me on. This is very timely for sure because it's just blowing up right now.
Yeah, I mean it's a good time. I think that your experience will really help people in a different area than I can. I am very focused on the data science, machine learning engineer roles. I have hired a couple data analysts, but I didn't go through that whole interview process. I didn't design that interview process. And I don't think I'm the best person to tell the story about what people are looking for in those positions and really how to excel. So I'd love to start with your background, how you got interested in data analytics. You've created your own consulting company as well, a little bit about that. And then a little bit about the podcast. I know that's a lot in that first chunk, but I think people are tired of hearing me talking at this point. So the floor is yours.
Sure. So, I guess back 6 years ago now, I was selling insurance full time, 100% commission, knocking door to door. And I finally had landed like my huge white whale of a client. And then something happened, higher up decision was made, and they dropped the insurance that I had sold them. So I took 3 months off and just started doing some research. And I kept finding analytics, data analytics coming up over and over again. And I found out that Greensboro or UNCG, which was 2 blocks away from where I was living, actually had an MBA with a concentration in that. So I decided to go back and get my MBA. Then after my MBA, I guess I should pause and kind of sit on the MBA a little bit. I had 3 internships. 2 of those internships were flaming dumpster fires. Like I worked for this huge company and I just can't do it. I can't work for like that typical corporate culture. The last internship I had was with a company that was like a fraction of the size of this $1 billion company. And I actually leveraged that into my first consulting client. So I launched my consulting agency right out of the gate. I hadn't actually ever worked as an analyst, which is kind of the ultimate irony, isn't it? I haven't had an analytics job in the traditional sense, but you could say I've had about 16 analytics jobs over the last 3 to 5 years, if you want to frame it up that way.
Well, I think selling consulting services to a company is harder than it is to get a job. So, kudos on that end either way. And It's the exact same skill set, right?
Yeah. I'm working in this space and selling, my time. Well, actually, yeah, I was selling my time. I'm now working more so on a retainer base. But then I hit a lag probably about 2 years into the consulting where I just wasn't landing clients. So then I started YouTubing. And coincidentally, the second YouTube video I ever made was reviewing the Tableau certification, the desktop specialist. And that got picked up by the search algorithm. And then I decided to create a course. And that led to LinkedIn learning courses. Also, Super Data Science found me on YouTube. So I've got I think I have 9 currently published courses. and I've got about 3 more that I've recorded but haven't been published yet. And due to my podcast, I was actually networking in this space. Turns out the economics chair from High Point University listened to my podcast and then wanted to come on. And then he actually, 3 days after he came on, he offered me a job teaching.
That's
So
awesome.
and I feel like that is a long and windy story. And there's other things in there, but I don't want to overshare.
No, well, I think one of the biggest common themes that I'm seeing with almost all of my guests is that sharing your work, creating some sort of content, putting yourself out there leads to opportunities. And
Absolutely.
a lot of people, again, who I've talked to, it's not that they're going out and getting the opportunities. The opportunities are actually coming to them because of the more concrete things that they're doing. So this has been a complete 180 in how I looked at things. Is I used to think, oh, if I want something, I go out and I try and get it. And it's flipped around a little bit, is I can, if I create something good and I share it with people, almost all the things that I want will come to me anyway. And they'll be a lot more likely to stick because they're coming to me rather than me reaching out. I mean, the best type of sale, the best type of client is one that already wants to work with you. And that works the same way in the job market. I'm sure we'll hear a lot about more. This is not data analytics specific. This is any job. If you're reached out to by a recruiter from a company, your odds of getting that job are a lot higher. If a friend works at the company and they recommend you and the company reaches out that way, your odds are a lot higher. So, creating these opportunities, which you are probably one of the best people at doing this. I should probably start, get your advice on how to start a podcast and do some of these other things. But, to me, that is something that's really not well understood by college students or people who are looking to break into these fields. Is they're like, well, I have to be doing all of this pushing. And you have to sell a little bit, you have to reach out a little bit. But I think you get a lot more dividends by like putting your head down and creating and sharing than trying to sell yourself. Because if you have content, you have a critical mass of stuff, it sells itself, right?
Yes and no. I feel like I want to push back on that a little bit. I think it's a question of scale. So I would say the number one skill that I had building out my consulting agency is that I sold insurance door to door and just got destroyed with rejection after rejection. So I kind of built up a thick skin. So being able to sell like one-on-one is a hugely valuable skill. But then scaling these interactions is kind of more of a form of marketing. So it's kind of a weird tango there because you have to get a skill set and you have to build something tangible or at least valuable, I would say, and then you can start to market it.
Yeah. Well, I think a good kind of corollary here is, let's say I have a startup and I'm trying to get funding, right? Mm-hmm. If I don't have a product yet and I don't have customers, it's a lot harder to sell that, right? It's a lot harder to sell an idea. And if we're going into an interview and I haven't done any projects, I haven't shared my work, I don't have anything to show for it, talking my way into that position is going to be really hard. On the other hand, if I do have a background, they've seen my work in other places, that sale becomes that much easier because I can legitimately back it up. And again, you talk about warm and cold transfers in sales. If they've seen my work before or they've reached out to me, that is a warm transfer and I have a higher conversion rate. So I agree with you 100%. Mm-hmm. I think that I'm focusing right now more on just the first click, getting the interview. The second part of the actual interview process, you 100% have to have that interpersonal touch. You 100% have to, be able to, convince them that you're worthy of this position.
ABC, always be closing,
Exactly. The wolf of, I'm trying to think of a street associated with data. Yeah, exactly. So, from your perspective, what are some of the most important skills to have, both technical and non-technical, for breaking into a data analyst position?
So I think that probably the biggest skill, I was immediately going to say sales, but I think you could actually back out of that into saying it's influence. So not only selling yourself in an interview, but for you to have your projects get traction in your company, you have to influence those who are decision makers. So that's probably the number one thing. And even if you have just a little bit of technical acumen, but you can, pitch your manager and say, hey, I can build out this model, even if it's just in Excel, that could be a huge improvement on what they're doing. And that can help you get recognized. And then that can help you grow. So definitely influence is an important skill. You definitely need also that technical acumen. And I almost feel like it's fetishized in this space now. Like it's almost like this deity that everyone worships, and they're constantly like trying to it's what is it, the Red Queen, where you're running as fast as you can just to stay where you are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the huge challenges. I get so many comments about this. It's like this job posting has like 20 different tools. They have 3 different programming languages I should know. They have, I should know Tableau, Power BI, Click, Plotly, Shiny, and no one can possibly know all of those things. First of all, I don't think anyone should learn all of those things or be proficient in all those things, but how do you navigate that challenge that there is so much focus on the technical skills, at least in the, breaking into the first stage of getting the first interview. After that, I think if you're in, like that kind of goes out the window, I would hope, at least a little bit. But what do you recommend for people to do if they're facing that, like, oh my goodness, I'm overwhelmed with all the technical stuff I'm supposed to know?
So I would say if we want to look at it in terms of like almost like an investment strategy, I would say learning data visualization is going to provide the most return on investment, because it's something that you could learn Tableau or Power BI within a week, but that is enough of a differentiator. And granted, it is, September in 2020. This may change. But for right now, what I'm seeing is just having those data visualization skills combined with sales acumen or marketing acumen or supply chain. That is a differentiator in the market currently.
Awesome. And so I talked with Kate from Story by Data a little while ago. She talked about Tableau Public, about sharing your work there. Are there any other places you recommend sharing or developing those skills? Obviously, your courses are one place, but any other options for people looking to just really get better? What techniques should they use to expand on those? Because that's something I personally don't know a ton about.
So I think LinkedIn Learning is a fantastic resource. It does 2 things though. So you learn the skills, but you also get that LinkedIn badge that goes on your badges and certification within your portfolio, your LinkedIn profile. And I think that branding aspect of it is really important. And I actually, do you know Michael Galarnik?
I think so.
So he's got a huge data science vlog that's getting or a blog that's getting like 150,000 views a month. And we were talking about signaling. Like the debate we had was the value of online education versus traditional, like a university or college. And currently, universities and colleges having a degree from there is a very strong signal. Even though you could argue that the technical skills they're teaching are 10 years out of date, just having a 4-year degree sends a very strong signal to an employer. Online courses, on the other hand, you're not getting as much of a strong signal. But I would say LinkedIn does a good job of giving you that kind of certification. So if they check out your profile, they can say, oh yeah, for example, I'm teaching at Greensboro College this course called Case Studies in Business Analytics. And what we're doing is we're kind of taking this hybrid approach of we have in-person lectures, but they are prepping for those lectures by taking my online LinkedIn learning courses. So by the end of this semester, they're going to have 3 badges saying that they took Power BI courses. They'll have a Tableau Public portfolio, and they're also going to have a student practicum where they're actually doing case studies, or they're actually doing like actual analytics work for my agency. And I'm using that as a conduit to kind of unpack like the project that we just wrapped up was, we're not really doing a great job of email marketing. Like we have a weekly update. So what I did was I broke the students into two teams and they competed on click-through rate and open rate. Whichever team got the better performance there got a shout out from me on LinkedIn. But it's also something that can add to their experiences.
Love that. I'm a huge believer in sharing your accomplishments, showing what you've done. And those are all really good ways to do that. I mean, I might as well weigh in on the certificates versus college degree as well. I think certificates are really great, but they also don't show you as much as a certificate plus a really good project, right? A certificate shows that you sat through the course, but it doesn't show that you can apply the knowledge. And I have that same problem with four-year degrees as well, right? You can sit through and maybe pass some of these exams, but are they really going to be relevant to my company? Is what you learned in algorithms or in your intro to data science course going to be able to help my company? And so I almost categorize them as in the same way, is that they're not applied degrees for the most part. And so the best thing that I really, I think either of them are very valuable if you combine it with a portfolio, of
Right.
projects just like your Tableau Public, like you're talking about, like the volunteer work you're talking about in your course. So I really like that you're doing that with your course. To me, that is one of the most actionable things as an employer that I would be looking for. Is like, well, they check pretty much all the boxes. They have some sort of like academic chops, like some credibility. They have real work experience from volunteering, and they've shown a couple different ways that they can understand individual problems from the Tableau Public or from, I count those as projects in general. Are there any other, I guess, elements that I missed out that are important for considering hiring?
On that point about online versus traditional education, the metaphor that I have kind of used in the past is that universities and colleges are like a Freightliner. They can't really change very often, but these online courses, so for this Power BI certification course that I created earlier this year, I had finished the course before the certification even came out. So I think that having both of those combined send a very strong signal, because not only are you disciplined enough to get through a 4-year education, but you're also up to date on the current trends.
That's awesome. I never really thought about it that way, is that, I created this course about how to start a career in data science, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can update it whenever I want. I can film a new interview tomorrow and put it in there.
Right.
And to add something, sorry, like that to a curriculum in a university is unbelievably difficult. There's a lot of bureaucracy associated with universities and stuff. So
yeah, you're telling me. I literally got set up across I got set up across High Point University and Greensboro College at the same time, and it was my first time teaching in person, and it was, man, I almost went into this like weird headspace of like, I don't want the dean to be mad at me, which is such a weird. It's like I felt like I didn't know myself because I'm not used to being like afraid of being punished.
Yeah.
There's something about that institutional power that is quite remarkable.
Yeah, well, especially with all the stuff going around globally, I think traditional schools are really going to have to adapt how they do things, because online learning, if you're looking at it from a cost perspective as well, if I was a consumer of these and I had a choice between taking a certificate program that's $500 and going to a 4-year university where I wouldn't be going in, I'd be paying the same tuition as, as I would be if I was on campus and, doing housing, whatever it would be. It's what, depending on where you go, between $10,000 and $50,000 a year.
Right.
I would almost, if I was very disciplined, consider doing like, hey, I'm going to do the certificate. I'm going to do everything possible in terms of learning outside of that, creating projects, whatever that might be. Um, I mean, obviously, there's that credibility associated with the university, but holy crap, the cost benefit analysis that you'd be looking at. Right now, it's probably still tipped towards universities, but in 5 years, I have a really tough time imagining that we'll look at college 4-year degrees the same way.
Right. Well, what I think is fascinating, and this is something me and Michael Galarnik talked about a little bit on the podcast earlier this week, was that both have communities. They're very different types of communities, though. So the community that you've created with is it 66 days of data or 66
That's correct.
days of?
Yeah.
So
6 days of data.
that is a community, and that is like a hyper specific community. I would say what that, and I think it's amazing, and I think you guys are doing something really cool. What is different about a university degree, though, is that you have in-person connections. So people may learn with other people within your 66 days of data, but you're not like going to the cafeteria. You're not going to go work out together. I mean, it's a different form of community, and I think that both have their place.
Yeah, well, there's also the alumni network you get with a school, which is probably, in my mind, possibly the biggest selling point for going to university.
You beat me to the punch. That's what I was building up to, was that the reason that you can somewhat kind of justify that $50,000 a year price tag is that if you reach out to someone and you guys both went to Harvard, they're much more likely to say, oh, you're one of my, you're in my alumni network. You're part of the boys club or the club. I shouldn't say boys. It's like our in group. That's hugely valuable. And that, I think it probably applies more so to the banking world or kind of more rigid
Consulting and yeah.
Right.
For sure.
That's actually an interesting concept, though. Do you think name brand university or like the brand of university you went to has an impact on you as a data scientist?
So for data science, no. For data analytics, probably a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I look at it, the harder the skills are to quantify, the more your institution matters. So in consulting, right? Frankly, that's a kind of fuzzy skill set, right? It's like, can he talk? Can he, you can't show that you're a good consultant without being there in person. And one extra pillar of credibility is the institution you went to. I mean, I didn't go to a target school for undergrad, and I went back to the University of Virginia, which is a target school, to even come close to sniffing my first consulting job. On the other hand, with, for example, data science, if I build an incredible project portfolio and someone can see that, they're like, check, he can do the work. He can build this out. I don't have to think about that. In my mind, it's like the spectrum of the more businessy, the more they care about your school, the more technical, the less they care about the school, and more they care about your portfolio and what you can do. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine data analytics is a little bit closer to the middle because, and this brings us to like, what's the difference between data analytics and data science? In my mind, I see it as there's just a little bit more kind of business sauce thrown into the mix with data analytics. And there's a little bit more of that storytelling element as well. And those are, again, in my mind, just a little bit harder to quantify than being like, hey, look at this project I did. You could use this for your company right now.
So you're friends with Data Leap guy, Andrew Mao, right?
Yeah.
We had this exact same debate. And so what I've been told, or talking with Kirill from Super Data Science, analytics is a subset of data science. Andrew Mao said it's the opposite. The analytics is kind of the overarching umbrella, and then data science is this aspect of it, which is an interesting debate. There's definitely a correlation there, but I don't know if you know what? I totally dodged your question and said, this is what this person and this person thinks, but didn't like put my opinion out there.
I think that, I'm interested in that. Man, so the way I've described data science is that it does incorporate, I actually tend to agree with Krill in this because,
Because you're a data scientist. I got it.
well,
You're one of the chosen tribe. I'm one of the outsiders.
Well, so I look at data science when I describe the data science lifecycle, right?
Mhm.
It's you collect data, we have to plan, you collect data, you organize it and clean it, you do some feature engineering, you do some exploratory data analysis, you then build a model, then you deploy it, and then you create a feedback loop, right? There's that cycle. And to me, data analytics is the first basically half of that cycle, right? Where you're collecting data, exploring it, potentially cleaning it, whatever that might be. And then data science encompasses the whole life cycle. Machine learning encompasses basically the end of that life cycle. Machine learning is just the algorithms that we use for most data science tools. And then if we wanted to talk about AI is a lot, like pretty much all the machine learning algorithms and about half of the data science stuff. And then just a little bit of stuff outside of that entire bubble. So in theory, with that view of the world, analytics would still fit under that data science umbrella. But if you're just talking about analytics in general, well, I don't think you could lump AI into analytics at all, really. So,
So I have a different frame, and this is an interesting kind of bumping up of perspectives. So in my consulting agency, we kind of start with a decision or a problem. So are your sales low? Is your marketing return on investment terrible? I come in and I study your data, and then, you know what, we may realize that we have no idea about our pricing strategy. So I'd bring a data scientist in to do some web scraping so that we can compare side by side our price versus our competitors, our feedback rating versus our competitors. And that way we can kind of get a feel of, are we priced accordingly? So you could kind of use some, well, I don't know if AI would fit into that, but from my frame, the data scientist comes in just to do the heavy hitting, to write the algorithms. And I don't know if one is necessarily right or wrong, but it seems like it's two conflicting narratives that don't necessarily mesh.
I think at the same time, we might be just getting caught up in a naming convention. I mean, a lot of the stuff we're talking about is the same stuff. And, it is no sweat off my back either way. I'm happy to be a part of the analytics umbrella or the data science umbrella.
I feel a little bit more comfortable having you under my umbrella, if I'm being honest here.
Fair enough. I will say, if we're talking about the hiring process, data science does fall under the analytics umbrella without a doubt, right?
There you go.
If you're thinking about hiring data scientists, I think that goes generally in an analytics department of a company. But on the other hand, if we're talking about what the disciplines encompass, I think maybe that's the best way to look at it. Is if we're talking about the disciplines themselves, it's one way. But if we're talking about the hiring skill set, regardless, I've had enough talking about this.
No. We got to spend another 50 minutes on this specific topic. I want answers.
Well, that's the funny thing about data science and analytics is that there aren't always answers.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right about that.
So when you're hiring data analysts for your clients, what do you look for specifically?
I would say the number one thing I'm looking for is dependence. Like if I need to spoon feed them everything, they're probably not going to be a good fit. So I guess to back up, I have placed full-time analysts with some of my consulting clients because I'm charging a very, very high consulting rate and they see me as a line item, but they're not going to hire me as a part of their overhead. It's like there is a start and an end date of when they're going to be working with me. But once I kind of design this infrastructure, some of them have asked me to place full-time analysts to basically run the system that I've developed. And yeah, I would say the number one thing is being kind of a self-starter and knowing how to learn. Like you don't know what you don't know, but you're kind of self-assured enough that you could figure it out on your own.
Yeah, I really like that. That's one thing I probably could stress more in my videos. I try to stress it a lot in some of the stuff I talk about with projects, but I get a lot of emails like, "Hey Ken, what project should I do? You know, what'll get me a job?" And it's like, the whole idea is that you come up with a project. You figure out what
Right.
problems are interesting. You know, part of your job as a data analyst or data scientist can be like, "Hey, figure this out. You know, like this is this explicit task we want you to build a model for, whatever that might be." But the other half of that is saying, "Okay, we have a couple different problems. Which one should we focus on first? How do we go about solving that individual problem?" And like, there's a ton of creativity associated with that, right?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. We spent our whole first month of our podcast, we called it the discovery phase, where you kind of take an internal stock of what am I interested in. So an example, one of the people that I hired actually was a fantasy football fanatic. And I was like, you realize that you're doing data analysis already. Why don't you just take 2 weeks, learn the basics of Tableau, and turn all the analysis you're doing in Excel into a dashboard? And that helped him land a job.
yeah, I
So I
love
mean,
that.
so you're kind of looking inward of what sets me alight, what gets me full of energy, because we've talked about Naval Ravikant before off air, but Naval Ravikant is an angel investor, and he was talking about how the difference between someone who is passionately engaged with their job and though the person who is just putting in their hours, when you kind of extrapolate that over a career, that's the difference between like a senior analyst and maybe the CIO or the VP of analytics. So like kind of figuring out what is that internal driving mechanism there. But I mean, that takes like, I can't tell you that. That's like, you have to kind of sit with your thoughts, as uncomfortable as that can be sometimes, and work through it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a very important concept. It's getting maybe a little deep, but I, I think that if you're looking at data analytics or data science, you it is a difficult career to break into. By any stretch of the imagination, the interview process is tough. You have to be good at interviewing. You have to have a good background, and there are plenty of different jobs that you can get that pay the same, that have a lot more of a clear interview process. For example, like software engineering, web development, the expectations are a lot more clear cut than data analytics. Like the next software engineering interview is going to be a lot more similar to any other software engineering interview than a data analyst interview is to any other data analyst interview. It's just harder to measure that skill or what qualifies it, and it's also into a field. But I think that, I mean, the point I'm trying to make is you should work in data analytics and data science if you're passionate about, if you're interested in the types of problems that you solve.
Right.
That is going to be what keeps you studying. That is going to be what keeps you applying to interviews when, like the hit rate for interviews is less than 5%. In data science, I'm pretty sure it's less than 2% for the average applicant. So, if you have that and you love the process, I have no doubt that you're going to be successful. But it's pretty easy to not love the process, and you should know that about yourself. You know, um, I think that this career is great for a lot of people. I've loved it. It's been incredible for me, but it is definitely not for everyone, and that's okay. There is a career for everyone. It just might not necessarily be this one.
Yeah.
Might be a little heavy-handed, but let's break into some of the kind of resume stuff. What sticks out on a resume to you? What advice do you have for someone who wants to break into their first analytics role? It can be technical resume advice, just more philosophical advice as well. What do you think will make the biggest difference for them to land their first position?
So what I'm telling people to do, because we're actually doing a resume series on our podcast where, oh man, I probably should, you're huge. So I'm going to get like an influx of, hey, work on my resume. But we're having people who have been longtime listeners send us their resume. And my co-host, which I don't know if I've told you about her. She is a career coach. She worked as the career advisor for Wake Forest Masters of Analytics students. So she's like, not only has been in this space for a long time, but has been kind of doing it. I mean, I don't know if Wake is a target school, but I mean, it's pretty name brand, especially like in North Carolina. So the thing that we tell people to do is to essentially do keyword research. So find 3 of the jobs that would be your ideal, either first job or next job, and reverse engineer them. Basically pull out the keywords. Like, is it Power BI? Do you need to know SQL? And then that's really like your blueprint of how you spend your study time.
I love that. I have mentioned that in, I forget which other podcast, not podcast, whatever conversations these are, but the idea stems from, okay, how do you think about getting a job like it's a data analytics or data science problem, right?
Right,
Like,
yeah,
that
exactly.
is exactly how you go about it. It's like, okay, these are the types of positions I want. These are the skills that are required. You know, even if it's 20 positions, it's like, oh, like every single role is asking for these 3 skills. Maybe I should learn them. Maybe I should at least get familiar with them. You know, there's some of these incremental things you can do to increase your chances. And a lot of people are just like, oh, the job process is a function of me just applying a lot with the same resume. It's shotgun tactics. We're trying to just get volume out there. And no, it's not. There are things that you can do to greatly increase your chances, significantly more than sending more out, more applications out.
I've got a pro tip actually.
Yeah, hit me.
And this is nothing but a mindset shift. People who have internships are actual real experience. I think a lot of people think that, oh, I can't apply for this job because it needs 2 years of experience. Well, if you were interning junior and senior year, you have enough experience. I mean, maybe that seems obvious to you, but we get these questions all the time on our podcast about, well, we actually just posted like a little tactical Thursday about this 3 to 5 years of experience. A lot of times, kind of pulling back the curtain, that's put there by HR. That's not the hiring manager. That's like a standardized form. So Elizabeth says, apply for it anyways. Also, even if you did have an internship that you don't feel like, because 2 out of the 3 internships I had, I feel like I did nothing. Like I was like in this huge corporate structure working for a middle manager, and the work I did didn't matter. He wasn't even really going to look at it, but that's still technically experience. And I'd argue that that's probably the best experience I've had, because it really set the trajectory of this is the direction I'm going in now. Because I know like the hell on earth that would be my existence if I stayed and followed kind of the pipeline from my MBA up into this organization.
Well, there's 2 really cool things I want to like highlight in what you just said. So you did 3 internships, which is a lot in over the course of an MBA, right?
Right.
The first thing is that's 3 different types of experience that you gained. Like diversity of experience, especially in internships, is really valuable. Right. Not only for getting an exposition, but also for understanding what you like, which you just mentioned. The other thing is that most internships, well, if you get an internship, the probability that you get a job with that company goes up just exponentially, like off the charts higher. And the fact that you did 3, I mean, even though 2 of them were not great internships, you know, from the experience perspective, the connections you made, you had 3 opportunities there that had significantly higher chances of landing a job than any of the applications you could possibly send out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the idea is that, holy crap, like doing these internships, don't look at them as like, oh, I did it, now it's on to the next thing. These are relationships. These are things that if you do really well and you have, you can create a job offer from them, that's incredible. You got your first job, or you have that offer and you can leverage it. I mean, it's basic cognitive science that if I have something, I already have a position, one, you're freed up when you're interviewing for other companies. You're a lot more relaxed. You know you have something to fall back on. But two, that's bargaining power. If you say, I have this offer, but you're like, I have this great offer, but I want to work for your company still. I'm still applying with you. This is there. They realize that you're in demand. They realize that someone else has vetted your skills to be enough to give you a full-time offer. So I love I don't talk about it enough, but I love the psychology aspect.
Well, I think I've told this story once or twice on different podcasts about, do you want to know why my third internship was actually a good experience?
Hell yeah, hit me.
So number one, I was interviewing with the president of the company. And then, I mean, there is still like over 150,000 or 150 million in revenue. So I was interviewing with the president, and honestly, I had a third internship lined up with this same company that I wasn't happy with. So on a whim, I went to it, and it was basically designed for like an undergrad, sophomore, maybe junior, to where they were like, you're going to take these Excel sheets and turn them into line reviews, and you're going to give us some basic analysis in Excel. I showed up to that interview with pretty much an alternate pitch of like, I can automate this whole system for you. And I don't know, I feel like I haven't ever heard anyone else kind of shape their internship, but a lot of these things are like more permeable than you would think.
I have to get Tina Huang on your channel.
Did she do that?
She did that. So she interviewed as a software engineer at Goldman Sachs. And once she got the software engineering internship, she's like, I'd actually prefer to work on the data science team. Can we do that? And they were like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of these things that people don't realize that once you have something, that is a position of power, and you have so much more to, I mean, she already had the internship. What are they going to be like? No, you're fired. Like, no, they're not going to do that. They spent a lot of resources hiring you, and the worst they could say is no. I mean, the downside consequences are not that bad. And I mean, you never know unless you ask. I mean, that brings me to a topic. I love your feedback on this, is the questions as part of the interview process. Like what you ask the interviewer, I think is one of the most important things that people overlook. And that in the same line of thinking, that gives them some perspective about how you value yourself, right? If I'm coming in and I have questions about, like their selling points, their red flags in a company that I want to make sure you don't have. If I'm vetting you a little bit as well, it's not like a whole full-on interview from the other direction. That shows that I have some standards, right? It shows that I have some value in myself, and I think that, I will take my skills somewhere else if this isn't going to be a great opportunity for me. I mean, it's like just like dating or any kind of law of attraction out there. It works the same way in these interviews, and you can do that by, when you have the floor, what types of things you ask. One thing I always ask, and this is, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. This is a very high risk, high reward question. But if I'm interviewing, I'll say, okay, I enjoyed this interview. I think that some of my experiences really match up well with these roles. What from my background do you think would lead to the most success in the role for me here? Right? And when you do that, the interviewer literally has to articulate from their own mouth what they like about your background and why you would be a good fit for the role. Right? They're telling you that. And if they're saying it, you believe what you say, what comes out of your own mouth for the most part. Again, wouldn't recommend that to everyone. That's could be a little bit of an arrogant question.
What if they're like, nothing?
Well, that's why it's the risk reward, right? but there is, if you think about it, it's like a fun element of psychology that's interjected here. This is part of that puzzle of cracking into a position that you love. It's like, well, these are people. It's not just about what you can do. There's so many other factors that contribute to this. Like, what other strings can I pull that maybe aren't just my projects? If I can't differentiate there, where can I differentiate? Sometimes it's through just like the little small things that you don't even think about.
Man, I am trying to come up with a question. So I, I don't interview for analytics jobs, but I do pitch clients constantly. And I will say this, that some clients are a pain in the ass. And you can just tell. Like, it's not necessarily that I would ask a question, but it's more a fact of I could read the room. Oh, you know what? Actually, we can pull this back to interviewing. So my first internship was with a guy who was he was the quintessential like mid-level like status climbing guy. Like the entire time he tried to make me feel as uncomfortable as possible in the interview. Like tried to like power play me, but he was like not good at it. Like it didn't
I hope he
I
watches this.
yeah, come at me, bro. But I could just tell that like it wasn't and then we like the first day, like he took me to lunch and then was on his phone the entire time. It was like a bad date. It was like he was just rude. Like if they're rude and they're like condescending to you,
Why would you want to work there? Yeah.
right? But it kind of gets back to this, I'd say, broader theme of get over your scarcity mindset. Because like what I did, and what was her name from? You said IBM that
Tina
pivoted.
Huang.
That's
What?
coming from a place of power and like I know my worth, and if you don't give me what I'm worth, I'm going to go elsewhere. I mean, that sounds like a little bit adversarial, but like you don't need to verbalize that. Like if you know what you're worth, the world is going to kind of match that. Like people will kind of either they're going to be like get out of here in the case like maybe that's the right thing that should have happened anyways, or they're going to be like, you know what, you're right, and I like you and I want to grow with you, maybe have you like kind of get promoted up the ladder of this company.
Yeah. I mean, there's very few scenarios, again, if you're being not an asshole about it, where I think projecting some of the things that are important to you are also really important. You know, um, if the office culture isn't a fit, you know, like I'm very laid
Right.
back. I'm not going to come into the well, I actually come to the office very early when I work in normal positions, but I leave at like 3 p.m. And if they're not cool with that, like, you know, I'll get my hours in, but that's just something that's really important to me. I mean, I don't know how many companies are cool with that, but I guess that's kind of why I work where I do. But
Can you and I are both unemployable essentially is what it is.
it's possible, yeah.
Like
But because of our own demands, not the other way around. That's what's important there, right?
I think it's funnier just to leave it ambiguous.
I was for a while when people would ask me what I do, I'd just say I was unemployed, and then they'd be like, "Oh, at least you're not saying you're an entrepreneur," and I'm like,
It's the same thing.
"Oh, yeah." Like,
Yeah, I had to change my Tinder profile from entrepreneur to like actually the name of the company because I just wasn't getting any matches because they're like, oh, entrepreneur,
unemployed.
you know, lives in his mom's basement.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I mean, branding, right? If we're talking about getting a position, it's all about how you, or a date. It's all about how you position yourself in the market, right? All right, all right. That's really all the questions I got for you. You have anything? Happy to share any initiatives you're working on. I'll link to the podcast, the YouTube channel below. Um,
Um, yeah, I do actually. So we're starting a new series. We don't have an official title yet, but I am taking one of my students from my Greensboro College class, and I'm facilitating an internship with Tried Local First, which is a nonprofit that I'm the treasurer of. And what we're going to be doing is having a weekly podcast where we're going to touch base. So essentially, what Christina is going to do is Try Local First has gotten a $25,000 PPE grant, and Try Local First is an economic empowerment nonprofit that supports local businesses. So they are dispersing that across the member businesses who are part of that organization. She is going to be, she's, as of today, she actually created a survey to send out to those who actually got the data. So she's already started the data governance process. And what she's going to do is combine all that data, put it into Tableau, and visualize it as an economic impact report. So that can go out as an email, and it can also go out to funders and government organizations that might get more funding for Try to Look First.
Awesome. Well, so if you want to follow along with that, anyone watching, I will link all of the resources associated with that. It's just going to be on the podcast as a series, right?
Yeah, it'll be on the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast.
Sweet. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this, and hopefully we'll talk again pretty soon.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.